Last year, GG played Cowboy in the final round against FPX ZQ's Birdie Queen, managing to get a tie and secure a win for their team, giving them the championship. But is Cowboy going to carry any team to the win in COA 5 this year? Is he meta? Let's discuss. Over the years, the survivor meta for COA hasn't really changed that much. With each new year and each new character introduced, both hunters and survivors get an ever-increasing pool of characters to pick and choose from, new strategies to come up with, and new strategies you have to counter for said characters. To understand why tournament meta is very different than rank meta, first we must understand why the mentality you have to have is completely different. Roland from B4U said it in this interview that I did with him.
We decide, what we want to practice for the night. So it could be like round 1 strategies, round 2 strategies, or just like specifically different things like not rescuing in order to go for the tie, determining that we need to get 3 out, 3 survivors escaped, and we just flip up the strategies every time, figure out what strategies work, what combinations work, and what doesn't.
Tournaments differ from normal rank mode because teams have a specific goal they need to aim towards, a certain number of points that they must achieve to be able to beat their other team, and they must choose between risk and certainty to be able to decide if they'll be able to win. Here we have rank. You play characters that you are good at. You try your best to synergize with your team by playing a rescuer, a support, a kiter, and a decoder. Your goal is to get as many players out of the gate as possible. Here we have tournaments. You must play the most consistent characters. You have to play a certain strategy to be able to counter the hunter that you can expect from the person that you're playing against, based on the research that you've done of that player. Your goal is to achieve a certain outcome. Maybe securing a tie is all that you need to do. With all this in mind, Cowboy seems to be a little less of a good option, because although he seems like he's a game changer in some matches, his abilities are useless and not game changing at all if he isn't near the survivor when they are knocked down. He is inconsistent and tournaments need consistency, but maybe his kiting skills are strong enough? After watching recent tournaments in China, the IVL Summer League in 2021 and the NA-EU tournament called the IVT that we had just recently, I compiled a list of survivors that I saw frequently in those tournaments and what we can probably expect from COA 5. Let's make a distinction between round 1 and round 2 survivors. Other rounds can be very wild and heavily dependent on each team's speciality, so round 1 and round 2 are usually the ones that you'll see the same type of survivors in across all teams. Round 1 survivors are ones that all teams will take if the option is open for them to take them, if they haven't been banned, for example. This can also happen if those characters are available in round 2 or round 3, they will always pick them if possible. Round 2 picks can sometimes be picked in round 1, and this can really depend on the map, but usually these survivors are only seen in round 2 and onwards.
Round 1's also arguably the most crucial because it's, the first match kind of decides the flow of the next few rounds.
Yeah, no limitations for either side.
So it can be very competitive, very, very close. And then later as you get on with more bans and kind of more or less popular maps in a sense, more strategies will develop.
In the round 1 tier, we have Priestess, Seer, Mercenary, and Forward. These 4 have always been meta due to the fact that they are very consistent in their kiting, rescuing, and also in wasting the hunter's time. So these should come as no surprise to you. Mechanic is also in this tier and was banned very often in the IVL tournament, but with her recent nerf I was a little bit hesitant to put her in the round 1 category. I think that she has become more of a liability than she used to be, as each year brings new hunters that can slowly start to counter her. It is possible she may fall into round 2, at least at the high tier of round 2, but I'm not completely sure. As for new survivors that are meta, we have Prisoner and Entomologist. Prisoner was picked very often, and this is understandable since he has become an incredibly strong decoder over 2021 and the beginning of 2022. With his very strong ability to kite and his very, very fast decoding, especially on big maps, that is something that is becoming very typical in tournaments to see. Entomologist surprised me, but after watching the matches I start to understand why they started to play her in the IVL leagues. In the matches that they play her, she counters some of the meta hunters with her fast mobility and ease of turning, which can dodge some of the long-ranged abilities that some hunters use. Round 2 survivors include Explorer, Gravekeeper, Wildling, and Postman. Gravekeeper is almost a round 1 survivor and was played very often in round 1 in these tournaments, but not as often as the other survivors. He is a great kiter and a great rescuer, and you will probably see him quite a lot in COA 5 because he is a very consistent character. Explorer was banned quite often in the IVL leaks, but I think that he's fallen off just a little bit since that tournament, and with recent adjustments to other characters, I think we need to see where he'll be placed. Coordinator was a common pick for round 2, due to there being more bans than in the first round. She makes for a solid rescuer and a solid kiter and a good replacement for any of the round 1 survivors. Wildling was picked due to his ability to kite for a very long time, and his harass that sometimes comes in handy in some situations, but he does carry some risk and there are some hunters that heavily counter him, and his long decoding can be a little bit of an issue. Postman wasn't really seen that often in the IVL matches. He has been considered to be a great kiting alternative to any decoder and great replacement for any decoder in general, especially in team compositions that don't contain any decoders. So it's possible that we might see some team comps with him, at least in round 2. Round 3 and more include Painter, Perfumer, Barmaid and Embalmer. Painter and Perfumer were picked because of their kiting skills, but due to them either feeling present to the hunter or due to their abilities taking a lot of skill and luck to use consistently, they aren't picked in earlier rounds. Barmaid's recent buff has made her much more viable, but she suffers against round 1 to round 2 hunters with their ranged abilities, meaning she is better against lower tier hunters overall. Embalmer was picked in IVT and has always been considered a very good survivor to guarantee a tie that is very important in a tournament, and with his recent buff it is possible that we'll see him even more often than before, because he will help teams secure a tie more consistently. Little Girl, Patient and Psychologist are very new to the game, and Psychologist and Patient were banned semi-often in the tournaments I watched, so it's quite possible that they might be round 1 survivors as well, along with the other ones, or at least they might be banned by the hunter. Little Girl hasn't had any debut yet in a tournament, but survivor mains in our server do consider her to be very strong, and I definitely think she will be at least a round 2 survivor, possibly a round 1. Cowboy though, he isn't in any of these tiers. Where is he then? I put him in the special picks. This is due to the fact that he is quite good at countering certain meta hunters, for example Guard 26 with his ability to use his lasso to be able to transition kite. Although I'm pretty sure that Cowboy himself would not like to be put in this tier. But I think that he would like you to like this video and press the button that has the same color as the poncho he's wearing. Subscribe. Other survivors that are not on this list are just not consistent enough. Either that or we have yet to see what their changes have done to them in the meta. For example, Acrobat is very possible that he'll be picked in this meta because he has been played quite a lot in rank due to his new change where he can do the forwards roll, although that has been nerfed. Enchantress, for example, has had a complete rework, and we don't know where her standing is in the current meta. In some cases, even Toy Merchant is a good pick for some maps. You guys also have a very strong opinion about where each survivor should be put on the tier list, S all the way down to D. And think about that, you guys also made a tier list for a video, do you guys remember that? If you haven't watched that video already, then you should click here, if you really want to see what the rest of the community thinks where each survivor should be placed on the tier list.